What's up? Welcome to the Existential Stoic podcast. Have you ever wanted to read the Tao Te Ching, but thought it would be too hard, too difficult, too obscure, maybe? Today you're in luck because we're going to talk about that. So we're going to look at the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, a pretty famous book. I'm Danny and my buddy Randy. What's up, Randy?
Hey, Danny. Yeah, this
And
one.
so what do you think of it? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, this one was a
That's what you thought.
pleasure. This one was a pleasure to read through. I've read through it multiple times before, and it's just something that it's very easy to read. Uh, almost every one of the passages has something that really makes you just stop and think. I know this is too much information, but I use this as like a toilet reading book for quite a while because it was just it was so good. It was like
Yeah.
just enough time, and you got something from it every time.
Yeah, you know what I like about it too is it's the style you can, because each section's so short. So you can really like read one, spend a lot of time with it thinking about it, reflecting on it. And the whole book itself is not long. You're talking about I don't know how many pages it is exactly, but it's pretty short
Hmm.
overall, maybe like 30 if it was typed out like in normal format,
Yeah.
instead of like that, like stanza poetry style. Yeah, it's kind of dense. So it's nice because I think every time you look at it again, you get more out of it, which is cool. There's always something new to interpret.
And crazy thing is most people actually have some exposure to this book even though they may not realize it. Like that saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. That was
Yeah,
from this book, Tao Te Ching. So
as it was.
a lot of people already know that.
Yeah, and a lot of the ideas too, I think, are pretty similar to ones you might come across like in like the other ancient philosophy, stuff like that, other, even other religions and stuff like that. So I think you'll see some overlap too, which is kind of cool.
Hmm.
What do you find most what do you think is most appealing about it, I guess, in terms of like, maybe the ideas?
I kind of one of the things that I first was attracted to about it was the idea of doing without doing. Like the Tao does
The
nothing
action
and
of
leaves
inaction.
nothing
Yeah.
undone. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
and kind of the idea, because I think before I ever read the Tao Te Ching, there was this movie that I saw called The Tao of Steve. It was about this dude who was like, I don't remember too much about it, but basically he was like picking up girls or something like that, and he was into the Tao Te Ching, something like that. But it was kind of this whole idea of doing without doing, and I think that's a very interesting thing. But there's a lot of other areas. Like every time I read it, there's definitely more stuff that sticks out to me. Um, yeah. How
Yeah.
about you?
I really like Wu Wei. The action of no action or doing without doing is really a cool concept, I think, and also a challenging one because it's kind of like getting back to like almost like our nature. I also like the idea too that in the down there's this. It's kind of like, I guess you could say it's contrary to modern world sees a lot of this as like false and
Hmm.
fake, and I think I always like that idea too because it's like questioning whether we're doing this right or whether we have things right. And I think that Taoism really does support a return to nature in a way that, is very different from the way we live now. But there's still a lot that can be applied from that, I think. And you can learn a lot from it, even still living in the world that we live in, obviously.
Yeah. So I'd like to just go on a little bit of a tangent to begin with. I remember one of the
Go ahead.
passages was something about like slowness will always beat speed. And so it reminded me of the tortoise and the hare. Uh, how like the tortoise always wins. No matter how many times you read it, the
Yeah.
tortoise always wins. And the passage in the Tao Te Ching was talking about that. But then there's a language that I've studied where Tao actually means turtle. And like there's theories of the world where like the world is turtles all the way down. And so I just found
Yeah.
it like kind of a unique coincidence how the turtle always wins. He's talking about slowness and it's turtles all the way down. And Tao means turtle in a language. And I was just like, I
It's
wonder
interesting.
what's going on.
Did you ever read
Turtle,
Discworld?
turtle.
Did you ever read Discworld? That any of the Terry
I
Pratchett
haven't
books?
I haven't read no.
The Discworld supported by four elephants on a great turtle.
Oh, I've
Not
okay,
too bad.
okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool.
You might have seen they did movies with it too. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we do so Taoism was about, I think it was in the really like 400 or 500 BC area. I think it was written, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it's during the Warring States period of ancient China. So there's a lot of social unrest and stuff. And like it was an idea that came out about that time, there's a bunch of others. You get Confucianism, Maoism, all these different ways of approaching sort of rethinking how we should basically think and conduct ourselves. And the goal was to get social harmony, right? To be better people. And I think that's central to Taoism, is like trying to understand, human nature in a way that we can kind of get back to our roots and ultimately have a stable, better society where we're not, destroying the world around us and being so, I think, separated from it. I think that's a crucial thing in this, which is, we have this separation from nature. And in a sense, we've kind of like cut off part of ourselves. You can think of it like that, I always think of this, whenever I talk about this book in class, I always tell my students, like, think about the last time you were actually in nature. Like, most of us are, in our houses, in our rooms, in a building, we're in a community or in a city that was planned by people, that's all laid out. There's nothing really like natural, no natural formations. And we think that's the world, but it's really like a facade we placed on the world, right? It's something fake that we're kind of living in, and we've distorted the natural world. So it's in a sense kind of trying to get back to, what's natural for us and thinking about our natures too, so we can be full people, right? In an important way, which I think is also an interesting idea.
Yeah, and I like how in the Tao Te Ching it kind of oftentimes comes back to this duality of things going on. Like there was one saying where it was, let's see, what is it? I don't remember. But oh yeah, when goodness is lost, there's morality. So like we have this whole idea of good and bad, and we need to, justice, and people need to be good or bad. But like you lose that, and then it's there. People will just be good. And like the other thing is like stop thinking and end all your problems. It's like, but we're like, no, I need to think my way out of these problems. And I remember like I went to this Sedona method course a while ago, and like one of the big things would be he would just ask like, are you trying to figure it out? Because people just try, like people get their problems because they're thinking, and then they try and think their way out of these problems that come about from thinking. But it's like you can't do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, that whole, I mean, it's funny because a lot of times you'll see like Taoism is associated with like going with the flow, but it is true to a certain extent. It's like it's taking a non, we taking the course of least resistance essentially. And I think you're right. When we overthink things, we make all these problems for ourselves. When if we just stopped and sought silence, we would probably find the answer, right? Or we'd know what to do, or just do it. Do the right thing. And I think you see this kind of throughout the Taoism. I think that's one of the things people do struggle with when they first read it, is there is a lot of like weird use of language where it's a lot of, double negatives, or like a lot of, contradictions, but it's meant to get you to that point to see that, it's beyond that overthinking, or it's beyond rationalization sometimes, or beyond conceptualization, that you get to like the truth.
And also there's a ton of different translations for this book. Like every single one is a completely different translation.
Yeah.
So if you guys are reading it for the first time, I would urge you to, look at a few different copies and find which one you think reads the easiest. Because I've read some of them where I don't understand it at all, and other ones where it's just like, wow, this is really deep.
Yeah, from what I understand too, from it, like, when they translating from the ancient Chinese, I guess, you can translators sometimes, especially in English, they'll either favor like clearer sentences and sentence structure, which then you obviously like it changes it a little bit and changes to how you read it, or they'll favor more like trying to keep the actual flow of the text, which is kind of more like poetic. And so I think depending on what side you land on, it can be very difficult in some cases. And I'm sure some of them just might not be that good, because that's always possible too, Yeah, I think that's a good point though. Finding a translation that works for you is really important, and reading it multiple times.
Yeah. So back to some quotes that stuck out. I mean, we were just talking about the idea of letting things take place on their own. So there was one quote that's, do you have the patience to wait until your mud settles and the water is clear? So it's kind of like, I heard this many, many times in meditation places and everything, how like our thoughts in the mind is like a glass of muddy water, and we just need to be patient and wait for the mud to settle, and then you have clear water, and like you can see clearly. And this is something that I know me personally, like I'm always trying to figure stuff out. I'm always trying to make things happen. And like being patient is one of the hardest things ever because it's uncomfortable and it's not something that I've done very easily yet in my life. And so reminding myself to be patient on a regular basis is helpful, but also like, sometimes when things seem like really, really like I need to figure it out, sometimes just stopping and being like, okay,
Yeah.
no, just relax.
And that's like one of the, it's a really good one too, because it's true. Like being patient is probably one of the hardest things in the world. And it's actually really similar to like we talked about when we talked about Marcus Aurelius's meditations, right? It's similar to the idea of, understanding what's in our control, and realizing that certain things are just out of our control and really, looking at it so that you can get a clear sense of what you can do or what's possible. And I think in this case too, you can kind of think of it that way, where you're trying to like wait and let things settle, let your emotions calm down, get perspective so that you can act in a way that's correct rather than just either overthinking or making the problem worse or making it, worse already.
And
Yeah, it's
oftentimes,
interesting.
like,
Oh,
oftentimes they work themselves out. Like,
yeah.
I forget which book that I was listening to or reading, but the guy was saying how, he just made a habit of writing down his problems and then putting them in a desk drawer and forgetting about them. And then he'd come back in
Yeah.
like 3 weeks or 3 months, however long later, and they were all figured out. Like, not that he actually had to do that much to do it, but like they worked themselves out or he fixed them or whatever. But it's just like not a big deal. Yeah.
Or a lot of them probably weren't even problems. Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
that's the funny part too. I think we when our emotions are high and stuff, we'll make problems and then make it worse by doing something or by trying to act on it, trying to figure out rather than just letting it go.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's interesting. I really like their idea too, because I mean, Taoism, you get the sense too. I think in a lot of the in a lot of different sections, that it's kind of like a pulling back. You get it's not a taking direct action all the time, more of like a kind of pulling back and finding a place of like rest or balance or peace is important.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you get that this idea, I think it's like really trying to kind of like know ourselves first
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
act in the world correctly, not like, something that's kind of like fabricated or fake. I like don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so going what you're saying there with knowing yourself first, there was another passage that says, uh, thus the master travels all day without leaving home. However splendid the views, she stays serenely in herself. So this was something very interesting because there's that saying like wherever you go there you are, and like
Yeah.
I've been so guilty of this in my life. I fantasize it like, oh, as soon as I'm doing that, as soon as I'm that, then I'll be happy, or like then everything will be perfect. And I always think that like changing the situation is going to change anything, but it's like nah, because wherever I go, there I am. I bring myself with me. But like this passage here, where the master travels all day without leaving home, so like they're able to stay with themselves and realize that like that's what's going wherever you're going, and uh and then you can enjoy everything that goes on, but the whole time you're being yourself.
Yeah, it's a really important idea. It's cool because we do this we're all guilty of it. We all think, if I leave this person or if I get this job, if I go to that place, that place, then and basically we're all trying to like run away from ourselves.
Yeah, my fourth
And then we
marriage,
find out
that's
that
the
we're
one
still
that's going to
there.
work.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's like it's just running away constantly instead of like actually like taking a moment to actually like be with ourselves and get comfortable with who we are first. And then everything else will be fine because we know ourselves. And I think it's funny, it's like I said, there's a lot of overlap. You see, it's like the central idea, I think, that is so important of just like self-understanding,
Mhm.
not, not trying to be something we're not trying to run away from ourselves, but facing it. And I think this is, something common too in Buddhism, and through meditation, that idea of trying to kind of like untie all the crap in your head so you can get clear about kind of who you are and know yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. uh so let's see, another one that I liked was what is firmly rooted cannot be pulled out. So this is something that I've had to go back and teach myself time and time again because, like sometimes, especially when I'm beginning something, I'm like so amped to know it all that I don't really build a solid foundation. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of it's come back to bite me a few times in my life where I haven't learned the foundation. So once I realized that in those areas, actually going back to build a stronger foundation in it
Oh
definitely
yeah.
helped me because then I had something to build upon. So like the idea, but also what I like about this passage, what is firmly rooted cannot be pulled out. It's kind of like the idea of grounding yourself. Like we were talking about
Yeah.
being in touch with nature, and a lot of times people think grounding themselves, getting in tune with nature, but just like being sure of who you are, being deeply rooted in yourself, and then no matter what comes up in life, you won't be swayed.
No, yeah, I think that's a good one too. And it's like, knowing your values, knowing what's actually important. It enables you to make better choices, but also not to be kind of rocked or shaken by other things. I always think of it too, like the deeply rooted tree, right? If a storm comes, it's not going to blow over, or it's not going to get knocked over. It's got that foundation, it's got that strength because it has that strong sort of grip on the ground. It's
Mm-hmm.
another way to maybe think of it too, is like that strong grip on reality, or being present in the world.
And
Yeah, it's an interesting. Oh,
people like it when you are deeply rooted, like
yeah, yeah,
because I think that a lot of people sometimes are uncertain themselves or uncertain of situations, and like you can just tell when there's somebody who's very deeply rooted, how like all of a sudden you just feel secure, like you're just like, okay, you're like, okay, they've got it handled, so I'm okay, this is good.
yeah. It's like you see somebody who seems, yeah, they're not worried about something, or they know who they are, so you just feel good around them,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think but it's a hard place to get to.
Yeah.
I think this is what's interesting because Taoism, I think it's funny. Like sometimes when you read it, it has this like, it can make it seem easy, because the language sometimes makes it seem like getting there should be almost easy. And in a way it should be, because it's like our natural state, I guess, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's like we've kind of put all this construct on top of everything and made it harder for ourselves. We just need to like let go.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about their claims on desires too? Because there's a lot about desires throughout the Tao, about letting go,
Yeah.
and that, um, basically our desires are fulfilled when we let go of our desires, or
Mm-hmm.
when we have none. And that they say several times in different ones that the sage has no desires, or desires nothing.
Yeah, I like the whole the duality part of it, where it's like all of our problems exist because we want the opposite. Almost, there was one that I wrote
Yeah.
down that give evil nothing to oppose and it will disappear by itself. So it's kind of like those desires, like the only reason the desires are there is because we're clinging to them. Like it's
Yeah.
almost like we want the desire more than we want the actual object. And I remembered I listened to Lester Levinson a long time ago. He was this guy who was enlightened with the Sedona method, and he he said, with whatever it is you desire, either have it or let it go. Because like most of us just get caught
Yeah.
in purgatory between having it and letting it go. Like we can't let it go because we desire it, but we can't have it because it's too hard to have, or it's out there. And he's just
Yeah.
like, whatever it is you desire, just have it or let it go. And I didn't get it for a while. I was like, how can you do that? And it's like oftentimes you end up getting it by just letting it go. Like
Yeah.
here's another quote that's kind of on the same line. Be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. If you realize you have
Yeah.
enough, you are truly rich. So it's like this whole idea of all these things that we want out here, if as soon as we want them, we're lacking. We don't have them.
Yeah.
But like once we let that go and we're content with what we have, we truly have everything.
Yeah, I really like this idea too, because it's also like that idea too of like, being full with just yourself. That we try and add on all this crap. And especially like, I mean, like, come on, we grew up in like the most consumer society in the world, right? Where you go shopping to feel better and stuff. And like we act like acquiring things will make our lives better, or will make us better, make us more important, more valuable, right? Make our lives matter more. And the truth is, it doesn't add any of that. What really matters is who you are. And until you get that right, it doesn't matter what you add on top of it. And I always like that idea because you think of like desiring and acquiring things. It's kind of like just like it's like adding Legos onto like nothing. It just all falls away because there's nothing underneath of it.
Yeah. And plus, like, there's really not that much better than Cheesecake Factory and a Chevy Tahoe. Like, there's not. It's just not. You think there is, but there's just not. Yeah.
Well, it's like, and it's like answer that question of like, what do I need versus like what's out there. And I think that's really important to this too, is just understanding like what do we actually need in life to make ourselves, to make a good life, to be happy, to have our actual needs satisfied.
And like in being grateful for what you have. Like the idea that, oh, what I have isn't good enough, I need to get something else. Well, as soon as you get that something else, you're going to have the same exact attitude you have right now. And that new thing isn't going to be fulfilling at all. So like changing it around to, I'm totally grateful for what I have. And if something else comes my way, then that's awesome. But that's a different way to think about
Yeah.
it.
It is. Gratitude is like essential to it, right? It's being grateful for what you have and what's present just in the world already.
Mhm.
I mean, if you think about like we have so many like people forget how much beauty there is in nature and just how awesome it is just to be alive and be outside, and
Dude,
like
just
forgetting
even,
that.
yeah, even to be able
Yeah.
to breathe. Like I remember we both read this really good book, Seven Eves, about like space travel
Oh
and different
yeah.
stuff like that. And a lot of times in that book they were talking about like sometimes how you were running out of air in space. And as I was reading it, I was literally like having a hard time breathing. And then I'd put the book down and I'd be like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I can just breathe all that I want for free. This is incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's insane what we like. It's funny actually how we kind of like, I don't know, we make things so much harder. We make the world so much harder by having all these demands that we place on ourselves for no reason that don't really get us anywhere
Mhm.
further or make our lives any better.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's another quote. A man with outward courage dares to die. A man with inner courage dares to live. So, like, this is an interesting one. It reminds me of Zorba the Greek. He was just a guy who's like, sometimes you just need to undo your belt and, and have fun with the
Yeah.
world or something like that. But it's like kind of the idea of, a lot of people are daredevils, they're bungee jumping, they're skydiving, doing all of these things. And it's like, and that's like someone with outward courage. Yes, they're able to do that. But with inward courage, you dare to live because living can be painful and it can be uncomfortable. And you can have to go through some stuff and grow.
Yeah, probably more difficult too.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because it's easier
Yeah,
to just stay in our box. Like a lot of people are
yeah,
just like, I'll just stay where I'm comfortable. It's not great. I don't like it, but it's just it doesn't hurt.
yeah. It's easier to write to. It's also easier to like to do the grand action and self-sacrifice than to actually persist through the hard times and actually deal with things, right? And actually make things better. It's a lot harder
Mm-hmm.
over the long haul.
Yeah. Here's one that I'm still not sure I understand completely where it's coming, but I think I understand where I'm coming from. So we'll talk about it. It's fill your bowl to the brim and it will spill. Keep sharpening your knife and it will blunt. So like, and I the reason I'm having difficulty with it is so like it's the first part, fill your bowl to the brim and it will spill. So like
Yeah,
what I get from what they're trying to say here is that, don't do stuff in excess. But then I sometimes see like, well, you need to fill up your own cup so then you can overflow to other people. So I see that disparity there. And then the other part is keep sharpening your knife and it will blunt. So like if you keep trying to get better and better, eventually it's just gonna not be sharp at all. But there's that other idea of you need to sharpen your knife so that you can do more work with less effort.
yeah.
What's your
I
take
mean, I
on
think
these ones?
I think one good thing about the Tao Te Ching too is I think it is meant to be like metaphorical too a lot of times. So there's a lot of room for interpretation, and I think this is what makes it a fun text to read anyway. Because like and multiple times because I always find something new. But I think too maybe like with the knife one, right? If you keep sharpening your knife but you never use it, it'll just break. You'll eventually
Mm,
just break it. So like I think part of it might be yeah, you need to hone your skills. You need to hone your character, hone your skills, get clear about who you are and all. But you also have to do things. Because if you do nothing, if you just keep doing that, focusing on just that, you never actually used it, right? The knife just breaks ultimately, and it's never get put to use. You never actually do anything with it. And the bowl one, I always thought of that in the sense of like, you know, maybe desires or acquisitions, like we fill ourselves over, it overflows and we can't ever get it. So
Mm,
kind of having like a realistic sense of what we need.
uh-huh. Yeah, there's that kind of having the realistic sense of that. There's also I see it somewhat of being moderation. And then
Yeah.
there's also this other, I guess like a Zen parable or something along those lines where a master goes um to share his knowledge with his student. And he's like, you're like this cup of tea right here. And he just keeps pouring more and more into there until it's
Yeah.
overflowing. And he's like, if you really want to learn anything new, first you have to empty your cup and then
Yeah.
allow. Yeah.
No, that's good. Yeah. Like you have to actually like process it, right? And take it in, not just have it sitting in the bowl in front of you, but actually like eat it, consume it. Yeah. I
Hmm.
think that's good. I like that. Yeah. That
Okay.
works well.
Sweet. I'm glad we figured it out.
Yeah.
Uh,
Figure that one out.
oh, here's a really good one. Is a good traveler has no fixed plans and is not intent on arriving. So this one, definitely, I experience this in my life all the time because I always think that when I get somewhere, that's the end. It'll be like
Yeah.
the happily ever after type
You're
scenario.
good.
I'm like, as soon as I'm there, happily ever after, the end, you know. But it's never that way. It's just kind of like waypoints along the route. And it's just like, you know, wherever I get there, then there'll be something else, and then there something else. But it's like uh I like that because the good traveler has no fixed plans and is not intent on arriving. They're more involved in just the traveling, and they're okay with,
Yeah.
you know, changing things up as they come along.
We talked about this a lot too, with like, when we were talking about death and stuff and how to live like, either without regret or to live like the best life. And I think this is a really important idea, which is being there for the journey and being present in the journey and looking at the journey as the goal, not anything else. Because no matter where you get, there's always going to be something else, right? As long as you're alive, you're always going to still be doing things. So it's like seeing the journey as sort of the point and not anything beyond it. I think it's an important idea, I think, for all of us, because it's so easy to get caught up in thinking the next goal is where I'm going to be complete or then I'm done. And it's
Mm,
like, well, no, you still have to keep going. So,
mm, yeah, yeah. So overall, I mean, what do you think you get from the Tao Te Ching?
I mean, I think overall, I like it because I think it's about living, finding that path that's kind of like it's simplistic in a lot of ways, which I like. It's not about sort of like, it recognizes, I think, in an important way that a lot of what we get caught up in is fake or contrived or, something that we kind of create for ourselves so that, understanding that most of our problems are just fabrications, they're things we created. And that, I really like the idea too that, like you can live a good life and there's plenty of it. Your life's probably good already. There's probably so much in your life that's already good that you're not seeing because you're not letting yourself see it. Like those are some of the important things I get from it that I really like.
Mm, yeah, definitely. And I, I mean, for me, I really like the idea of doing without doing, but I'm still trying to understand what that is.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk
Yeah.
about that much. Yeah. We should. Wait, action, no action. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
usually interpreted that way, which is you're like the action of inaction or the action of no action.
Hmm.
I mean, I think it's about like depending on how you look at it. I guess it's this idea that we normally when we act, in the world, it's really intentional. It's end driven, right? And for Taoism, I think that the sage and their idea of action is very you might think it was like spontaneous action where you know yourself so well that you do what's right in that moment because it's the right thing to do without necessarily needing that extra layer of intention, like of that sort of end driven action, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So an example that's often given is like, if you practice like and I don't know if this is exactly right, but it works sort of. But like if you practice an instrument or if you like play a sport, you can't think about what you're doing when you're performing, right? Because you would probably be terrible, right? You
Hmm.
need to like you need to learn all those skills and you need to know it so that you have the muscle memory and everything so that when the situation arises, you respond in the right way. Right. And I think thinking of our lives that way, like how can we know ourselves so fully that our actions are like almost naturally flow from us, right? Rather than being sort of kind of this, like, I guess, rationally directed type, outside of ourselves actions, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, I like that, definitely. When you were talking about that, there's one area of my life where I kind of think that I apply this action of inaction type of thing, where is with kind of goal setting. So my goals, I know what I want. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I know what I want and I trust that it's going to happen. So kind of letting it almost take place on its own. Like I still work towards the goal, but oftentimes I don't know exactly how it's going to come about. And then these things happen like so much faster than I ever could have imagined. Like it just seems like
Yeah.
they just get sped up just because I trust that it's going to happen and I just let it happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. No, I think that's part of it. Is like, because you see like and then now Ching will talk about a lot too, like, it uses nature as like examples and stuff, and like, like that they'll talk about the sage like going with the wind or not bending with, it's this idea that kind of we have it within ourselves to do the right thing, I think. And we know what to do. We usually get in our own way. I think there's that similarity there too. So yeah, I think that's a good example. If you kind of like sort of having maybe a trust in yourself, knowing that you can do it and knowing yourself enough to just keep going and you'll get it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a complicated idea though. I like it. I return to it a lot to think about it because it's like I think there's a lot, about also like not getting caught up in like all the externals that we usually do, you know, being there for the journey, not like worrying about the end or thinking that things are going to be different because we just reached a goal.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of that present as well.
Yeah. But this is like one of those books where if you haven't read it yet, it's a very, very approachable, very doable. Like Danny and I were talking right before we started recording, and I was saying how, if you just read this and you read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, you will be doing fantastic. Like those
Yeah.
are probably
Yeah.
those are probably two of the best books you could read. And if you don't even like reading, you can find the audiobooks on YouTube and listening on double speed, you could complete both of them in about 2.5 hours total for
Yeah.
both of them to combine. So like it's something that's very, very approachable. Anybody can really do it. And if you're looking for kind of the way to get into studying philosophy or kind of understanding different ways of thinking, it's very, very low barrier of entry to get into.
Yeah, both. I think both of them. You're right, and I think they're both nice because they're the way they're written. You can approach them in small sections, and just do a little bit at a time. And they're both enjoyable to read. I think they're really fun reads, and like they're the kind of books too where you can like spend time with them with yourself first, and then if you really want to, then seek out other sources if you really want more information. But like they're great. Yeah, they're great starting points. I think everybody should look at them because they really do help too and give you a way different perspective on things that we don't usually kind of entertain or even think about.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add on this?
No, I'm pretty much set.
All right. Well, that's it. There's the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. We'll be back later this week with a quick fix. Check us out on YouTube, all the podcasts, apps, all that stuff. Please like, subscribe, share. It helps us out a lot. And yeah, we'll be back later. Later, Randy.
Later, Danny.